All right, so we're excited to continue our Hops Lockdown webinar series. This will be number 5 tonight. So tonight we're excited to sit down with Pittsburgh Pirates reliever Nick Burdi. Nick, thanks for being on with everyone tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this will be great. I think for everyone on tonight, we'll get a lot of good insight into kind of your high school up until professional, like kind of hear your side of how baseball's evolved and how you've evolved as a player. So I think first, why don't you kind of give a little bit of background on yourself, like starting from high school and all the way to getting to the big leagues?
Yeah, so I originally from Chicago. Started playing baseball when I was maybe 5, 6 years old, but I really didn't start taking it serious until maybe my sophomore, junior year of high school. I played quarterback in high school. I was super into football. And then one summer when I was like 15, 16, my dad, he used to coach our travel ball teams, and he was like, "Why don't we just try pitching?" I think we were like, low on guys in a tournament like over the summer. So I got on the mound and was throwing like 85, 86 as like a 15-year-old, and all of a sudden, like one of the other coaches was like, "Hey, like, what are we doing?" So started getting into pitching, and then around like my junior year, I started throwing, low 90s, mid 90s, and then my senior year is when I really started getting serious about it, training for it, and kind of, thinking that this is what I wanted to do for my career and, for my livelihood. So senior year, got drafted by the Minnesota Twins in the 24th round. Decided to go to college, went to the University of Louisville, was there from 2012 to 2014. We actually went to Omaha my sophomore and junior years, so that was pretty cool. Being able to experience that, because that was always something that I dreamed of. Kind of the reason I wanted to go to college was to be a part of an Omaha team. So being able to experience that was exciting, and then was actually redrafted by the Twins in 2014 in the second round. And then got into A ball my very first year. First full season started in Double A, and then kind of ran into some injuries and some roadblocks, and then debuted in 2018. So, yeah, kind of a quick summary, kind of cliff notes of how that kind of all evolved.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I think if you could talk a little bit about, because I know if you could talk about going from the Twins to how you ended up with the Pirates, I think is interesting, and talking about like kind of the Rule 5 draft and how you ended up kind of changing organizations and what that was like at that point in your career.
Yeah, so that was I was rehabbing from my Tommy John in 2017. Um, After, what is it? I think 4 years as a college player after you were drafted, and then 5 years after a high school player, you're eligible to either get put on the 40-man roster, or you can, if you don't get selected to your 40-man, all players are eligible for the Rule 5 draft. So I wasn't protected by the Twins. I was entered into the Rule 5 draft. I got drafted by the Phillies at the third pick, and my agent had called me. He told me to kind of sit tight. There was a little bit of like a bidding war, whatever you want to call it, kind of going on between a few teams. So about 15, 20 minutes later, I got in a call that the Pirates had traded me for international slot money, and then was traded from the Phillies to the Pirates, and that's kind of how that all evolved.
You know, that's great, because I think people, like, you hear about the Rule 5 draft, but I don't think people really know kind of how it works and how guys get selected in the Rule 5 draft. So
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting scenario. Like, you get picked on um, to basically be on a big league roster for that whole season. Mine was a little different because I was rehabbing, so they were able to put me on the IL, and so I went to the 60-day. But for the most part, I would say, you get, of the maybe 15 to 18 guys that are selected for Rule 5, 1 to 2 guys actually stick for the whole year. So yeah, it's very competitive. you obviously take up a 25-man roster spot. So to get selected, it gets very competitive, and obviously you have to produce and have to show that you can get outs or be able to hit whatever it is, what position at the big league level to stick around.
Yeah. Um, I think the first thing, because we have a lot of high school guys in this that will
John,
end up
hang on one second. I just want to jump in quick because I want as many people to hear this as possible, just while everybody's on. Nick, can you talk a little bit about your MLB blood donation challenge that you started since you got home?
Yeah, so got home, a few days after they had told us that the season was suspended. And my wife, Rebecca, is a ER nurse. So she was, or we actually watching the debriefing team on the news, and they kind of came out and we're talking about the blood shortage that was going on throughout all hospitals with everything getting shut down. There weren't as many blood drives. People weren't able to donate as much. So we were watching, and maybe 20, 25 minutes later, she was like, "Do you want to go donate?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? Like, let's do it." And on the drive over, the players and I with the Pirates, we have a group chat going. And Becca and I kind of sat there and we were like, why don't we make this more of a challenge and get more baseball players involved? So I texted a bunch of the guys. A lot of guys were interested. So I went and I did it first, kind of started the whole blood drive type of challenge. And I would say within the first 2 to 4 days, I mean, it got a ton of social media interests. A lot of people were seeing it, viewing it. So I think it, hopefully helped a little bit. And I still get some tweets here and there about people going to do it. So hopefully it made an impact and was able to help some people out there.
Yeah, that was a good thing, just because I know that blood is so important and people are scared away a little bit from that sort of thing right now. But it's perfectly safe, obviously, with all of you guys taking part in it, and that's just, they're always in need of blood because other conditions are still going on where that stuff is needed. So I just wanted to grab that before we had some people that maybe had to leave later on. So
yeah, no, it's been great. So hopefully it continues and we can see some more progress out of it.
Yeah. Hi, John. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I think the first thing I kind of want you to dive into is talking a little bit about your recruiting process in high school and how you ended up deciding on Louisville, and because I think it's important to talk about finding that right fit and talk a little bit about how you found the right fit and how you knew Louisville was home in your recruiting process.
Yeah, so my recruiting process was kind of interesting. It started around my sophomore year. I went down to one of the perfect game fall tournaments, and I think I threw 6 innings and struck out 15 guys. So all of a sudden I was throwing 92, 93 in that game as a sophomore, and all of a sudden things sped up pretty quickly. Before I was just talking to Illinois State, Northern Illinois, Creighton, some smaller schools in the Midwest. And then after that tournament, it really sped up. I started talking to some bigger schools, but the number one school on my list the entire time was the University of Louisville. And that kind of came from one of our family friends, Phil Wunderlich. He played baseball with my older brother. So when he went there, they had just made their first College World Series run. And I kind of looked at that as, one of the places I really wanted to play at. So it came down to the University of Louisville, LSU, and Florida State. So looking back on it, there really wasn't ever a doubt in my mind that's where I wanted to go. The biggest thing was the coaching staff, the way they were developing players, guys were getting drafted, going to the next level, and then also somewhat close to home. It's about a 5-hour drive from Chicago to Louisville, but that kind of was something that I wanted, so my parents could at least drive down for weekend series at home. They were able to come to some games because it's hard, you go to a major school 15, 18 hours away. They might be able to come to one series for the whole year, maybe. So that played a big part in it.
Yeah, I think that's important. Is for guys is finding that right fit. And like you said, you kind of knew right away, like, hey, this is where I want to go. And I think when we're talking to guys about the recruiting process, it's getting that feeling and like trusting your instincts on like, hey, this is the right place for me. This is where I'm going to develop.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with me was, you know, Louisville has, their campus sits right off of the highway. And as soon as we were coming off the exit, it kind of goes into all the stadiums, the weight room, all this stuff. And as soon as we came off that exit and I got to actually experience it for the first time, that's when I kind of knew that this is where I wanted to be and kind of wanted to, make home for the next, 3 years while I was in college and kind of start developing. So that's when I kind of had that gut feeling that that's the place I wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
Nick, do you think that not really pitching until you were in high school helped your development, or what position did you play when you were younger before that?
I would play like outfield or like first base. But I think from a development standpoint, I think one of the biggest things that slowed me down was the travel baseball kind of circuit, because I was going to the area code game, the Under Armour game. I would, pitch in these big tournaments like once a week, stuff like that. I'd go to like the Connie Mack World Series with the team. So I was kind of getting, derailed from actually going out and pitching. And that's one of the big things that I've told kids that are starting to play now. The biggest thing you can do is get on, like a 7-day kind of rotation where you can get bullpens in during the week, work out, and then pitch your game on that 7th day, kind of like what you do in college. So I guess that's one of the biggest regrets that I have, is that I let these travel ball circuits kind of take me all over instead of focusing on, developing as a pitcher as a 16, 17-year-old, especially when, you go to these showcases or tournaments, whatever it is. The biggest thing is just lighten up the radar gun. There's no actual sense of pitching or make anything happen. So I would say I don't think it hurt me, but at the same time, I wish I could have taken a little more time to actually understand, what I was trying to accomplish at a younger age.
Sure. And that's where I think that you kind of see that, or more and more people are talking about the fact that pitchers and players in general need to practice and work on that stuff a little bit more than going out and playing. You see some places advertise that they play over 100 games in the summer, and hopefully we're starting to understand that that's not necessarily a good thing to be
Right.
playing all of these games instead of working on player development and getting or even not playing fall ball, right? Because if you start to add up all of these games and all these innings, then I think that that's where you can run into some problems.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah. Matt, did you want to kind of go into another topic?
Yeah, do you think that playing football, I know you said you were quarterback, so that's still throwing, but do you think that did you play anything else, any other sports when you were younger, or is it football?
Yeah, I played football, basketball, and then I played soccer a little bit when I was younger. But yeah, people always ask me, like, what kind of helped you develop? Honestly, I was able, I was like 15, 16. Football was like everything to me. So, I was able to throw a football 60, 70 yards. Like, it was just kind of, my brother played college football. I always wanted to play college football. So that's all I kind of ever did. I just threw a football all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was kind of interesting, when I was able to actually get into pitching, the development of just throwing a heavier kind of football all the time, what it did to my arm. Because as soon as I picked up a baseball, like, it was mid 90s kind of out of nowhere. And I think just playing sports in general, different sports other than baseball, is one of the biggest kind of things that help kids just develop athleticism in general. I think just being able to play a different sport, put down, the baseball, the bat, whatever it is, for a few months kind of helps you develop different skills, different kind of ways to move your body, and then it kind of all intertwines once the summer kind of rolls back around.
Sure,
Yeah.
definitely. And where do you think that how have you seen the game change as far as where you were back when you were in high school compared to, I mean, you obviously can see high school guys now and even at the college level. How do you think that the game has changed as you've seen technology and things like that start to get integrated into the game?
And I think, it's interesting. One of the biggest things that I've seen so far is the size of players, the velocity that you have at a younger age on these guys. And I think it's such a competitive world that we live in now that, the training, the nutrition, the sleep, all this stuff is kind of getting ingrained in these kids' heads. And it's just making teenagers that much more athletic. So, like when I was growing up, I mean, obviously I threw hard, but, the next guy in our high school conference was throwing, 78, 82. And that was considered, hard. And now I remember talking to my high school coach, you have 3, 4, 5 guys in a conference that throw 83, 86. It's just starting to develop a little bit more that way. And I think also the recruiting that's happening in baseball is starting to take off. I remember talking to the coaches at Louisville, they have, 8th graders that are verbally committed to play baseball there. So I think the competitiveness is the biggest thing that's starting to change now is, kids at a younger age know that they want to do this and this is their passion, their aspiration. And that's what, parents want. They want to keep having their kids go out and achieve their dreams. So I think that's what we're going to see over time is it's going to become very one-dimensional sports in all sports, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, whatever it may be. I think kids are going to start specializing in that. And I think it's going to get more competitive from a sense that people's skills are going to be that much better. But at the same time, I think it also kind of loses the kind of groundwork that you put in, as a younger kid playing these different sports. So it's interesting.
Sure. Yeah. John, do you want to take the tech question and kind of go into that too?
Yeah. No, I think I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how, as a player, from a player standpoint, from where you were in high school to now being in the big league, say, was that 7 years or something like that? How you've seen tech evolve and how you've seen the game evolve from that standpoint and how you've had to evolve as a player to understand it, to use it to benefit you.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of goes back to Matt's question. I don't know if I ever even answered that, was the way technology is kind of being used in high school right now. For me, it was a big deal when we would have someone videotape our bullpens or our games. And now it's just you have these Edgetronic cameras, you have TrackMan, all this stuff that's kind of just data that's just sitting there. And then you start getting around to the draft. And I think it's really interesting that you see kids getting drafted in these higher rounds based off of spin rate. That just wasn't even a thing back, in 2011 when I was in high school. So now for me, especially this last off season, working with you guys, using a Rapsodo for real, I guess, for the first time and actually knowing what I was looking at. I think that's why I saw such a jump this spring training was I knew what I had to accomplish with the Rapsodo, and then also having video on me almost all the time, making little adjustments, little tweaks. I think that was something that I kind of appreciated more. But from, where the game is going, I think at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to the whole, Tom Brady aspect. You can have all these great, numbers, spin rates, velocity, whatever it is, but at the end of the day, you have to draft a baseball player and he has to go out and get results. It doesn't matter if he's got a 3,000 spin rate or a 1,500, at the end of the day, that guy's 60 feet, 6 inches away and someone's going to win that battle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the human element of it. It's it's the fact that at the end of the day, there's no data on personality or how you're going to compete when there's 40,000 people in the stands.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that like we talk about, just as players, in like a big league locker room. It is talked about, like, will my data get me paid more money? And it's starting to show that, it might not get you paid more money, but it will give you more opportunities based off of just having better stuff, from an analytical standpoint. Um, but I will say, a lot of guys in big league uniforms, for the most part, a lot of those guys truly believe that it comes down to, who's going to win that battle on that certain day. So
I think this is like it. It's something you like the three of us talked about in the off season is how like it gives the player more confidence. I think it gives them that advantage. Like you said, we can't teach the human element, but you can teach confidence. And I think as players, if you know your data and you can fall back on like, hey, I know what I need to do based on what it's telling me, it's going to allow me to be successful maybe in a pressure situation if you can kind of fall back on that. So
yeah, and there was even, we were playing the Red Sox in spring training. There was a certain situation that just came to my head, talking about it. Gave up a hit. I think there was one out. Gave up a hit. Guy was on first, and we knew he was stealing. He kept getting a bigger lead. And I kind of just reared back, fastball outside. We threw that guy out, and I think it was like a 2-2 count, 3-2 count. And there was a point in my head where I sat there and I was like, I know my fastball up in the zone is going to beat this guy. And so I just kind of threw as hard as I could up in the zone and ended up getting a swing and miss on it. So I think having that part of it, having a game plan and being able to kind of, like you said, fall back on that to me was kind of a difference maker in those tougher situations.
yep.
A lot of it comes down to probabilities too. That's what I think that a lot of the scouting reports are coming down to, right? Where you're trying to give yourself the best chance to be successful in a situation working on the hitter's weaknesses. And you know that maybe if I throw this pitch, there is still a chance that he's obviously going to hit it, but you're putting yourself in the best chance to succeed based on the odds. And you're literally just playing the odds, right?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting things with baseball, like, the thing I tell myself, like when I'm pitching and in a tough situation, bottom of the ninth, eighth inning coming in to try and, save a game, whatever it is. The biggest thing that I kind of tell myself is to not, walk guys, because like you're saying, the probability of that guy scoring after a free base, then you start putting yourself into these kind of detrimental situations where you no longer can kind of help yourself. So I've kind of always thought of baseball like that. It's like playing poker, roulette, whatever you want to call it. It's playing the odds that the game is going to give you and kind of running with it. So always kind of keeping chips in your favor is something that I've always thought on to fall back on.
Yeah.
I did have somebody sent me a question to change the subject a little bit. Do you have a favorite story from either the minor or major leagues that you could share with us that's maybe not inappropriate, but just in general, just something that you can think back on that you'll tell like your kids or grandkids someday?
I mean, there's a lot of stories, but I mean, I would say, for me, the coolest thing, to see for guys is being in a locker room when somebody gets their first call up to the big leagues. I've seen it a handful of times. But I remember like Byron Buxton, we played in Double-A together. Him getting called up was one of those cooler moments. Max Kepler, Kevin Newman, some younger guys that are in the big leagues right now, being in those locker rooms and seeing those guys get called. I mean, it's something that, you've worked for your entire life. It's a dream. It's something that you'll tell your kid. I remember when I got called up, I was in Indy, I was in AAA, got called up for the first time, and it almost doesn't feel real. So I would say those are always exciting. But from a funny standpoint, I would say my Double-A strength coach, we used to kind of go back and forth, messing with each other. and he saran wrapped my whole locker. And so it took me like, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes to get it all out of there. So I took his game polo the night before the game. I took it, I put it in water, I froze it, and I left it in there overnight. And then when he got to the field, like, I don't know, he usually gets dressed like 20 minutes before he heads out. His entire polo was frozen shut, so he had to go out there in a pullover and no undershirt. That was always a good one.
Well, that's the stuff that you don't tend to hear, just because, and even especially in the minors, maybe a little bit more than the majors. But that guys, like, that's a grueling season, especially in the minor leagues, right? So anything that you can do to kind of pass the time or have a good mood in the locker room is important.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is like the baseball season in general is a very, very long year. So that's why everyone says, to have short-term memory, because, to worry about a game that happened a week ago, I mean, that kind of stuff is just, it's going to drag with you for the 6-7 months that the season is. Mm-hmm. So to kind of stay loose, have fun. A lot of guys joke around. A lot of guys play cards. In Pittsburgh, we have like a game room with like Xbox, PS4, Papa Shot, stuff like that. Like, guys really do like it's just hanging out. And then I'd say about 45 minutes to an hour before the game, that's when guys, start to get locked in and really start to kind of focus on, what the plan is that night.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit again and kind of ask how, from a mental standpoint, you hear a lot. I mean, there's just so much surgery and Tommy John, and you went through the Tommy John and then the thoracic outlet and some other little things in between. So just from a mental standpoint, could you speak to how that process went, and how difficult that was for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's long. It's the Tommy John was 16 months. The TOS wasn't as grueling from a standpoint of like rehab, but the surgery itself was really tough. I mean, I was in the hospital for 5-6 days post-op. So, I mean, the biggest thing was having, family around. My wife was there. Having people just as a support system. But I would say from like a mental standpoint, I never like lost it or never kind of felt bad for myself. I kind of told myself after the Tommy John that, everyone kind of feels bad for you for the first few days or after the surgery, whatever it may be. But the season goes on. These guys that were all behind you all kind of move up a peg, and everyone's fighting for jobs. So, when guys get hurt, it stinks, but at the end of the day, it opens up a spot for somebody, and everyone's trying to get to the big leagues and just stick up there. So, I would never say that I felt bad for myself. I definitely had some tough days where, I had to kind of get through the rehab, had to go through some pain, stuff like that. But I mean, I always kind of took it upon myself to give it my all every day and, make the most of it.
I think that one thing that I've heard from athletes who have gone through that is it gives you an appreciation for paying attention to the details of your craft and your strength and conditioning and your rehab, just because when you're going through something like a Tommy John rehab, it becomes so repetitive but important, right? And that's where sometimes you can get lost in the repetitiveness of that. But then again, it does teach you a lesson about how important that stuff is. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I mean, the first 3 months of my first 2 months of Tommy John, I mean, I literally sat on a couch because they took the graft out of my hamstring. So they actually drill through the knee, go up through the hamstring, and then take the graft out from there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like you said, it's the first 2 months I was very wanting to just work out or get on a bike or just play catch. But then I knew when I had the opportunity to work out, that's when I started making the most of it. And the biggest thing, and the thing that I always tried to lock in on, was the throwing aspect of it, because I knew that was kind of be the foundation that I laid for the rest of the Tommy John kind of experience and would help me kind of keep moving in the right direction. So I think that was probably the most important thing, was taking every rep seriously to make sure that I wouldn't have any setbacks, or I wouldn't be able to get back to the goal of being able to pitch again.
Yeah.
There was a question here.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
What did you, it kind of ties into that, what we were just talking about. What do you think you changed pre and post Tommy John, and then maybe pre and post thoracic outlet surgeries?
I would say the Tommy John, I mean, there was obviously, I tried to take care of my body, tried to do as much as I could to be healthy. I mean, I made some adjustments. I don't know if they were the right adjustments, but the thoracic outlet, when I had another serious injury, that's when I kind of took it upon myself to be like, all right, whatever I'm doing isn't working. So now I need to try and figure out a way to get on a mound. And then that's when I found you guys, and we were able to kind of sit down and look at, like, hey, there's a lot of instability kind of throughout the body that might be causing all this pressure throughout the arm, and it's caused these injuries. So I guess from a post TOS, the biggest adjustments that I made were obviously doing a lot of PRI breathing type of work to fix the flared ribs, and then also actually learning how to use my bottom half. I think I always thought that I was striding or using my legs the right way, but until I actually sat down with you guys and were able to actually kind of understand what I was doing, that's when I learned, like, hey, this is how you actually do this and take stress off your arm than just trying to shorten my arm path or keep my glove really close to me. Like, I just thought like that was going to be the difference maker, and then the TOS happened, and I was like, all right, obviously there's still a lot of issues going on for this stuff to still pop up.
Yeah, that's a great answer. John, you want to get the anonymous question?
we'll disregard Ben's question.
That's all right.
He just texted me about it. That's why I was laughing. So, well, yeah, we'll get into it. So this one was, what weight room and or pitching drills would you say have been the most beneficial?
I would say from a standpoint of this year, the biggest thing that I took away from drill works was the box medicine ball. And I think that's on either of your guys' Instagram that we did. The box medicine ball really helped me emphasize using the lower half, being able to keep that back foot kind of grounded and pushing through the ground instead of, feeling like I was, but it was almost like I was jumping. Yeah. So learning how to use my bottom half properly from med balls was a huge one. And then I would say bear crawls. Like, bear crawls to me was something that I kind of picked up on. Like, all of a sudden my shoulders, my back just started getting stronger. And it wasn't like I was lifting a ton or doing that much, but I started realizing, like, I'm doing like 5 sets of 10, 20 yards of bear crawls. And like all of a sudden, shoulders kind of stacked on top of my scaps. Ribs were starting to get in the right place. And that was something I took into spring training. Like, I really focused on med ball work and my bear crawls. Like, that was 2 of the big emphasis I put it on, of like getting myself in the right position for that day, making myself feel like I was locked in and kind of ready to go pitch or go throw, whatever it might be that day.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a great answer. So what is there any advice that you could give to maybe a younger pitcher as far as what they can work on?
Yeah, I mean, like, I just kind of look at, my career and the way, like, I lifted in high school and even in college. Like, I mean, they had me like squatting and deadlifting, but working with with you guys this offseason, like I realized like I was never doing it right. So I would really say like, as a high school baseball player, like if you can't squat properly, if you can't lunge correctly, you can't do a push-up without, all this stuff, just easy body weight stuff. I think that to me is one of those emphasis that I would put on, until you can kind of control your body, what is deadlifting 350 pounds do for you if you're not doing it the right way. So that to me is something that I would give advice to players on, is making sure that your body can move the right way, because if it doesn't, then I think you start running into some issues that I had.
John, you want to grab that
Yeah.
organizational question?
This question was, what was the biggest difference from a developmental standpoint between the Pirates and the Twins?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I know the Twins have changed a lot, and I've talked to some of my buddies that are over there, and they've said that it's gotten a lot better. But when I was with the Twins, there really wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on nutrition, sleep, hydration. Even our weight room stuff was very, very basic. And getting into, the rehab aspect of it, going over, they had me doing like weight, 2-pound job exercises for like 4 sets. And it was like, and then I go over to the Pirates and it was like, hey, let's, focus on certain deficiencies that are happening. So like we would do 2 sets of, 10-yard waiter walks, stuff like that. And then I go into the weight room, with the Twins, it was, we were allowed like 2 scoops of protein once a week. And it was like, what is this doing me? And then you go over to the Pirates and it's like, we had all of our supplements, all of our protein powders. The lifting was more focused on individualization than, with the Twins when I was there. It was, kind of more just cookie. Everyone had the same thing, and you just kind of run through the same programs. So I think that's one of the things that I kind of appreciated when I went to the Pirates, was it seemed like they had a plan set out for me from day one to make sure that I, could maximize my career and performance on the field.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah, is individualization. Matt, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that one of the other things is that the hope is that all 30 teams eventually get to that point, because it seems like each organization is kind of evolving at their own pace, which is an interesting piece of it. Because you said even this spring training, and from looking at all the different MLB articles and stuff like that, like there was a Rapsodo at every field in every bullpen this year, right? And you can even see how that's different and that's changed. So it also speaks to kind of like which organization you end up in as to how far in advance they are.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of goes with the luck of the draw. I've always thought, there's a lot of talented baseball players out there that never got their opportunity or chance because of the organization they were drafted by. So I think it's a lot of it is luck and being in the right place at the right time. And I think you're starting to see certain teams trying to get to where, like the Rays, the Astros, some of these teams that have made these jumps from an analytical standpoint are trying to catch up to them, because you're starting to see the success that they've had with it.
See if anyone else wants to throw in any more questions.
I have another one that somebody had mentioned to me that wasn't going to be on. Without getting into specifics, can you speak, just because everybody was talking about it before all this stuff happened, but the Houston Astros are kind of getting off the hook a little bit in terms of what they did back during their World Series run. So without, again, getting into specifics with that, could you just speak to how something like that could impact the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously it's disappointing that the game kind of trended in that direction. And I don't think we'll ever really know what would have, actually happened in that playoff run. Who knows who could have won that World Series. But at the end of the day, too, I mean, we have a lot of guys that were on that World Series team that got traded in the Garrett Cole trade. And they've said it too, yeah, things were happening that shouldn't have been. But at the end of the day, those guys went out, they played baseball, and, pitchers still had to put up zeros. So, it's disappointing, and guys around the league have obviously been upset about it and very vocal about it. But I would guess, when baseball does pick up, that a lot of these fans and opposing teams, probably won't forget about what happened, and I don't think anyone expects them to be off the hook.
Sure. No, I appreciate the answer. I know that there's only so much, but it's still interesting to get the perspective of someone that's actually competing against those players when that stuff is going on.
Yeah, and I think I know two guys that pitched it, that were with the Twins that pitched against the Astros in 2017, and one of them gave up 6 runs in a third of an inning, and the other one gave up I think 8 runs over an inning and a third. And both were optioned right after the game. So yep. I think that stuff I kind of doesn't sit well with players, because you're talking about a lot of money taken out of people's pockets, because these guys were doing what they were doing, but also at the same time, you see these big contracts that were handed out to Altuve and Bregman through this time. And I think that is the other thing that's kind of upsetting about the whole thing, is these guys made a lot of money and some guys lost jobs over it. So I think players have a right to be pissed off about it, but I guess we'll never really get the real answer on it.
Yeah. You want to grab that other question, John? There are a couple of questions. While you're answering that, a couple more questions came through.
Yeah.
We'll go to this one first. Because this one came in first. Do you have any type of mental conditioning routine or practice you like to do pregame, in-game, or off the field? Or do you not have to mentally prepare to throw 100? But we'll get into how to mentally prepare.
Yeah, I would say, being in the bullpen, especially at the major league level, I remember in college I would get it, the 7th inning rolls around and phone starts to ring, and everyone's stomach kind of drops for a second. Everyone's waiting for their name to be called. But for me, it's always, the first few innings I try to hang out, relax, actually just watch the game, see what's going on, tendencies, that batters are having, umpires are having, trying to see what's going to happen, because as the game goes on, it's going to get a little bit tighter. The crowd's going to get a little bit louder. So I always try to have a plan for what's going on. But for me personally, I would say around the 5th or 6th inning, I try to take 10 minutes to myself. We have a little doorway that goes to the parking lot underneath the stadium. I try to take 5-10 minutes to myself to kind of go through some breathing exercises, kind of slow down the heart rate, because that's probably one of my biggest issues is as soon as that phone rings, my heart starts going a million miles an hour. So trying to slow that down. And then also, I'd say I usually get to the field around 1:30, 2 o'clock, say it's a 7 o'clock game. We have a hot tub, cold tub, and I usually try to sit in the hot tub for about 10 minutes. And I try to be in there by myself just so I can have a second to kind of visualize what that night might look like. So I try to start from throwing warm-up pitches in the bullpen to going onto the game mound, and then, facing 3 hitters. I just try to put 3 hitters, say it's Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, and I try to go through what it would look like that I would face that day. So, I try to just have a plan, because I think going out and just kind of pitching to pitch, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I would tell younger players is, this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. This is kind of what it takes, having a plan, visualizing success, and going out and getting the job done.
Yeah.
And that's really good from a mental standpoint. Are you, just out of curiosity, are you out in the bullpen going through scouting reports during the game, or is that something that you guys are doing before?
We'll usually, I mean, like relievers, like they have us in the pitching meetings. They obviously go through everything with us, but the pregame stuff is more meant for the starters. Obviously, we get value out of it. But like for me, say I get called in the seventh inning, the top of the six ends, and I can see, what three batters I'm going to face first. And every team's allowed to have it. We all have iPads that go into the bullpens, and it has the scouting reports on there. It has hot charts, cold charts, and I can kind of get a game plan together that, I'm going to do against the Brewers or do against the Cardinals, the Dodgers, whoever it might be that night. And so my game plan always varies depending on who I'm going to face to kind of start off that next inning.
Sure. Good stuff.
I'll get into this one that came through too. What do you think is more valuable, velo or location and movement?
I mean, everyone always kind of talks about that. I mean, I think you can watch big league games and watch guys with a lot of location or a lot of movement and location get a lot of outs, and then you can watch guys with a lot of velocity miss spots and still strike people out. But I think at the end of the day, I would say location is always gonna win, just from a standpoint of being able to put the ball where you want in certain situations. Obviously, it's great, nobody on, 2 outs, 0-2 count, like you can just blow a fastball by or throw a slider in the dirt, whatever it may be, and get a strikeout. But I think the location when there's a guy in second and third, 2 outs, and you're facing a Christian Yelich or Cody Bellinger, there's only very few places you can pitch to those guys because they're above average hitters, and if you make a mistake, they're going to beat you on it. So being able to locate to some of these elite hitters that are in the big leagues, that is something that I've really tried to emphasize over the years, is being able to obviously throw hard, but being able to put it where it needs to go.
Yeah. I think there needs to be that good happy medium of both, and like
Right.
it boils back to the scouting reports and like knowing who you're facing and like where
Right.
where
Yeah.
their hot zones are and where their cold zones are. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. Like we talk a lot about going back to the analytical kind of standpoint of this. We talk a lot about tunneling, being able to have your fastball and slider, fastball, changeup, whatever, maybe look the same for as long as they can, and then that's why you see a lot of those overlays in Pitching Ninja. And I think that's the biggest thing, is making everything look the same. And then you get 50, 54 feet away from the batter, and all of a sudden things start moving all over the place. I think that's when you start seeing success.
Yeah.
We kind of jumped over this, but I want to make sure that everybody who's listening kind of understands how important you value. Maybe they don't need to have as strict of a diet as you have, but how important eating and sleeping has become for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to prioritizing. What do you want your career to be about? So for me, like my biggest thing is putting food in my body that's going to help me either recover or be fueled for that night to go play a game. And then sleeping's the biggest thing for me. I try to get 8 to 10 hours a night, and that just goes it just shows that going through certain REM cycles and being able to recover better, stuff like that. So I've really made it a priority to focus in on that stuff. Water, same thing. Drinking enough water throughout the day. I don't drink any soda. I rarely drink any type of Propel, Gatorade, stuff like that. I just think putting the right stuff in my body to go out and perform at the highest level it's part of the job description.
Yeah, and I know that without imposing your beliefs on everyone else, from as far as what the adjustment you made this past off season, you're not eating any meat, right, or very little.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been very, very little. I mean, I would say we kind of integrated it very slowly. We went from eating just eggs and fish, and then over time, slowly weeding that out. And it got very strict on just plant-based. And I saw inflammation go down. I saw body fat starting to kind of dwindle away, and my recovery sped up. And that was the biggest thing was trying this out, seeing if this would help me in any way. And kind of the gains and success that I saw from it made me stay on track. And obviously it's a lot easier, when we have, our chef in the clubhouse kind of cooking these meals for us. But it's something that my wife and I have kind of honed in on and kind of made it a priority to, eat 2 pounds, 3 pounds of, fruits, veggies a day. And I haven't really missed meat that much. It's been good for me.
Yeah. And I think it's not necessarily the specifics, but it's how much you value the nutrition and the sleep that's so important for a lot of the younger guys to hear, or even the guys who are at the high school and collegiate level, how important that stuff is. And there's even a lot more guys in the professional levels that are doing that stuff too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, like, it isn't expensive to choose healthy options, I've kind of gone over it, just doing math and stuff like that, like going to a McDonald's and getting, whatever it is that you get that, it's $10-12 for the meal. And then all of a sudden you go home, a piece of chicken, broccoli, sweet potato, brown rice, whatever it might be that you have that night. All of a sudden, you're looking at like a $4, $3 type of meal. I think that's kind of one of the big misconceptions that high school and college guys get from this, is that eating healthy is expensive. But going out and buying in bulk, or just shopping smart, like, you can save yourself money, and then it's going to help you perform on the field.
Yeah, that's great. Someone asked, do you still play other sports? I think that you can answer that just based on a contract, right? Like, you can't even do anything in the offseason that could put you in a position.
Yeah, there's like certain stipulations, like obviously like the skydiving, stuff like that. Well, you can't do any of that stuff. I even think there's something in there that's like you have to be in a vehicle with like 4 wheels. So stuff like that. But yeah, like football, basketball, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's kind of on the back burner now. But I mean, I've integrated, agility stuff, sprint work, stuff like that into workouts. So still trying to be as athletic as I can.
Yep. And I tried to save this one towards the end. Somebody did ask if you had a favorite major league team growing up.
Oh yeah, I think I answered that. I said the Chicago White Sox. I think that was back in like the early 2000s when they were playing in the World Series, stuff like that. But I really wasn't ever like a die-hard baseball fan. I was always into football, and that was kind of my first love. But I mean, from a standpoint of like watching games, I guess I would say I've always kind of tuned into White Sox games.
Sure. John, you have anything else?
No, I think we'll gotta give a couple seconds to see if anyone slides anything in, but I think that was good.
One more time, just because I know that it was such a good cause, is Nick did the MLB blood donation challenge. So that hashtag is out there, and I know that it's important right now for the hospitals to be getting those blood donations. So if anybody can help with that, then I'm sure it's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, anyone's able can get out and do it. We appreciate it, and I'm sure the hospitals do too. So
thanks for coming on, Nick. I think it's time to close the door after the question that just got submitted. So
all right, sounds good.
But John does need to smile a little bit more.
No, seriously.
He gets a little too serious.
He needs cheese, I know.
He needs a sandwich. All right, guys. Thanks for hopping on board, and then we'll be on tomorrow. It's Mason Fioli's on tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Yes.
He's in the San Diego Padres organization, so it's 7:00 every weeknight until we run out of guests. All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Nick.